Good day, everyone. You are welcome to an episode of my law class at Abdullahi Legal Academy. My name is Abdullahi Adibayo Abdurrauf. The topic that I shall be discussing with you here today is the definition of law. However, if this is your first time on this channel, I urge you to subscribe to this channel and also press the notification button so that you will be personally notified whenever we release another content. You can also like and follow our Facebook page with our username, which is Abdullahi Legal Academy. Without further hindrance, let's get into the lesson. When we are talking about the definition of law, there are many definitions of law that people are used to in our society today. And this gives rise to two aspects of definitions of law: the definition of law in its general sense and the definition of law in its technical sense. When talking about definition of law in its general sense, we shall be talking about the law of grammar in linguistics, the law of thermodynamics, the law of demand and supply in economics, the law of indices in mathematics, the law of karma in philosophy, and all other definitions and all other kinds of definitions that anybody might have given law at any point in time. But if you see all these kinds of definitions of law, it aligns with the specialization of the person that gave us the definition. The definitions of law in its general sense are those kinds of definitions that people gave to law at some point in time based on their speculations and area of specializations. And some example of law of this kind of nature are law of indices in mathematics, law of demand and supply in economics, the law of karma in philosophy, the law of grammar in linguistics, and the law of thermodynamic in physics and biology. If you see all these kinds of definitions of law, you will see that it aligns with an area of specialization, and all those people that are giving this kind of definition at a point in time were giving it only based on their specialization. And when we are talking about the definition of law in its technical sense, we are talking about a set of rules that has been laid down by an authority that has the power and authority to give such rules, which is binding on everyone in that society and which is followed by sanction whenever any of the people that is subjected to that law go against any provision of such law. So when we're talking about law in its technical sense, this is what we are referring to. And this kind of definition of law is what we shall be referring law to from now till the end of our class. So when we're talking about law, we're not talking about the law of demand and supply in economics. We're not talking about the law of karma in philosophy. We're not talking about the law of thermodynamics in physics or biology. We're not talking about the law of motion. We're not talking about the laws of grammar. We are talking about law in its technical sense, the one that whenever a person goes against it, there is punishment, there is sanction that will be meted out on such a person. That is the kind of the definition of law that we are explaining here, and the kind of definition of law that we shall be explaining further. And as you can see, this kind of definition is not influenced with any philosophy or any area of specialization. It is just technical and it's just there in its real sense. And that is why it is being distinguished from all other definitions of law. Let's take, for instance, the law of grammar. If anyone goes against the law of grammar, the worst of it is that such a person may just commit blunder and there will be no sanction for such a person. And the law of karma, you can't even go against the law of karma, because the law of karma entails what goes around comes around. We're talking about the law of motion. The law of motion is also a natural law. You can't go against the law of motion also. And when we're talking about the law of demand and supply, all these kind of laws are some kind of law that even if a person broke any provision of such a law, there will be no punishment for such a person. But if we are talking about law in a technical sense, if a person goes against any of his profession, there will be definitely a kind of punishment that will be waiting for such a person for doing such a misconduct. And this is the reason why Abiola Sani has given all the definition of law in his introduction to Nigeria legal method. He said that law is a body of rules made by institutions, bodies, or persons vested with the power to make such rules which are binding and enforced amongst the member of a given state. This is according to Abiola Sani in his book titled Introduction to Nigeria Legal Method. And it is through this analogy that Ese Maleme gave us the definition of law in his book titled The Nigerian Legal Method. It defines law as a rule of behavior, a code of conduct, the rules and regulation of a particular country, the rules usually made by the legislative arm of the government, which order the way persons, bodies, and society should behave, and the whole system of rules of a country. Let's just juxtapose between the definition given by A.C. Malemi and Abiola Sani. You will see that there are 3 or 4 predominant things that we are going to see in these kinds of definitions. The first one says that it is a body of rule made by an authority that has been vested with the power to make such authority, to make such law, which is binding and enforced among the member of the state. Take that aside. And the second one given by A.C. Malemi says that law is a rule, a body of rule, a code of conduct, the rules and regulations of a particular country, and so. All these kinds of definitions are given to law to expose us to the real definition of what law should be in its technical sense. We're talking about law in its general sense. The law of demand and supply is not enforced on anybody, and it's not even binding on anybody. The laws of grammar, even though the prescriptions as how to use the English grammar, for example, has been prescribed by the traditional grammarian. And if you see all these kinds of prescriptions, if a person, even a native user of English language, if it defaults the use of these prescriptions, there is no penalty for such a person. And if we're talking about this kind of definition that has been given by A.C. Malemi and the definitions given by Abiola Sani, these definitions expose us to law as a kind of an important thing that should not and should never be gone against. Because if a person go against any provision of law in this kind of sense, such a person will outrightly be punished for doing so. And it's a kind of thing that regulates the conduct of the society against this conduct and prescribe a kind of behavior that a person or a group of patients that lives in a kind of community will exhibit at a particular point in time. If you check into the definition given by A.C. Malemi, he also mentioned that law are rules usually made by the legislative arms of the government. If you are to apply what he just said into how everything is in Nigeria, we see if you check into section 4 of section 1 of the 1999 constitution, it gives the legislative arm of government the power to make law, and such law will be binding on the citizen of Nigeria. And we're talking about the law of indices in mathematics. It is not being made by the legislative arm of the government. The law of demand and supply is not being made by the legislative arm of the government. Neither is the law of thermodynamics is being made by the legislative arm of the government. You can see the real definition of law as it has been distinguished by the 2 classifications of the definitions given to the law according to how it is being used in our society. Now, let's go further. Another thing I would like you to know, as I've mentioned earlier, is that the definitions of law in its general sense are made by some set of people according to how they see that law should be, according to how they feel that law should be, according to their own area of specialization, according to what they see as law, according to what they just think that the law should be, according to their own whim and caprices. That is how they give us what the law is according to their own feelings. And when talking about the law in its technical sense, it is what I've just mentioned earlier, according to how Ese Malemi and Abiola Sani has given us the definitions of law in their books. However, the most important thing that I would like you to notice about the definition of law is that there is no single definition of law that is accepted to be the most accepted definition of law, because a definition of law will also need us to go further to need another definition for law. If we define law for now, if Abdullahi Adebayo Abdurrauf defines what law is now, it will even give us another reason to find, to go further, to look into what law should really is. Because a definition of law will not be sufficient for us to end all the definitions of law. It will still give us the reason to look further into what the definition of law is and to look further into how we can define law. If anybody, be it a professor of law, be it a judge, be it a lawyer, be it an advocate, be it a legislator, anybody that defines law for us now, after the person has tried all his best to define what the law is for us, a need will still arise for us to look further and to go further, to look for more definitions. Because if we try to solve the problem of the definition of law, it will only lead us to getting into more complex and more problem, one after the other. And this is why Okuniga said in his unpublished book that nobody, including the lawyers, has ever offered, and nobody, including the lawyers, is offering, and nobody, including the lawyers, will ever be able to offer the definition of law to end all definitions. It means that a definition will still put us in need to look for more definition of law. Thanks. I'm very grateful for watching till the end. You are on another episode of my law class at Abdullahi Legal Academy. My name is Abdullahi Adebayo Abdurrauf. And please do not forget to like, share, and comment on this video in the comment box. The topic that I shall be discussing with you next is the features of law. Till then, have a wonderful legal day ahead.